Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. I'm excited to be joined once again by my friend and co-host, Zen Garcia, for continued study on the book of Genesis. Zen, are you there?
I am, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How's your week been?
Really good. Really busy. Doing. Just been focused a lot with a bunch of different crypto projects, and I
Mm.
did a show on that to help others that are new to the space to gain some exposure. Bitcoin reached its all-time high tonight, appropriately,
What's
because
it?
I just did that show.
What's it on?
It hit 22,000
Dude,
earlier this evening.
nice.
Yeah,
20.
it's 21,820 right now.
Wow. Um, have you gotten into Hex and Axion and all that stuff too?
Not Axion, just because 20% of the coins go to the developers. I'm looking at Wise, because Wise, nobody gets any special privilege, not even any whales, not even the developers. All of the coins are public auction, so everybody has equal access. And that's the one I'm focused on, rather. I did get into Hex before the big payout, but the Axion I'm not really much interested in. I'd rather get into Wise.
That wasn't my understanding. I'm by no means an expert on any of this, but my understanding was yes, that Hex was going to the developers, but that was not the case with Axion.
Well, 20% does go to the developers,
Mm.
from what I understand. But again,
I'm not sure
I'm
about.
no great crypto expert either.
Well, I mean, the concept of both being CD is Wise a CD based deal also
Yeah, it
work
is.
work like a CD.
Yeah, you can stake, but it only is public auction for 50 days.
Oh,
Like tonight is day 37,
oh
I
wow,
believe. Oh
wow.
no, day 36. Yeah, today is day 37, and
You just
so it's only good till December 30th, the last day of this year, and then January 1st you can get your tokens. But it's already going to be the seventh largest crypto project in the world when it goes live.
wow. So you just did a show on that right before coming on tonight, just now.
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, you should, because I also talked about this Tron chain and bankroll, which give you 1% every day,
mm.
and one of them you can compound. But yeah, and then I also talked about Celsius Network, which pays you interest weekly on your cryptos. So like, instead of holding currency in your bank or dollars in your savings account where you're getting paid 0.1% interest, you can hold cryptos in your Celsius network and get paid up to 13% for US dollar coin, Tether, DAI, and others that are, stable coins. And then for like Bitcoin, you can get 7.97% interest. Ethereum, I think, is like 8%. A number of different coins, but instead of holding them in your Coinbase or your crypto wallet, if you hold them in the Celsius network, you actually get paid interest.
Yeah, that was what intrigued me about both Hex and Axion is that it's
Hmm.
not just sitting there. I mean, it's cool to watch the values go up and down. Like with Bitcoin and stuff, but for it to be actually accumulating while it's sitting there, actually accumulating interest for you, and way more than you get in any kind of bank. That's
Right,
interesting thing.
exactly.
I don't know a lot about this stuff. I'm fairly new to most of that stuff, so I'm going to have to get caught up on that for sure. Definitely have to.
Yeah, it's a good thing to learn and to gain knowledge on, because, like I said, it's beneficial. And I even talked about how, there's entire companies now that are going into, instead of holding cash in their treasuries,
Mm.
they're going into Bitcoin and putting hundreds of millions of dollars um, and that's why the price has driven up so much, because
everybody's
there's
holding now.
institutional.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the retail sellers and people that have been in, they're not willing to sell, and the institutions are having to purchase from what's available. And because, yeah, nobody's selling, the price is going up exponentially. I mean, it's gone parabolic, 180% this year.
Yeah. Exciting stuff, man. Man, this has been
It really is.
a disappointing and exciting week. Geopolitically, there's of course lots of daily disappointment going on there, but man, I've had a really good week.
Awesome. Me too, brother.
Yeah. So what else you got going? What else have you been working on?
I just finished the calendar, and I am writing the introduction for Diane Cover's book on Yahweh's unique timepiece explained, which is about the Enochian lunar solar calendar. And then I'll have time to work on the Enochian movie project, which I did get the picture of you and Mike, and
Okay.
so I'm really excited to meet him as well sometime. And he seems to be very intrigued with this project, and so I think it's going to be amazing once we can really focus and put our minds on creating something that incorporates all of what we are coming to know in doing the shows that we've done on this, on not only Enoch, but also, the Genesis narrative, because it also plays, well, I think it will play a part in, what we bring out, like the Methuselah's sword and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure. What I got on the screen for people who are watching right now, I've been getting some pretty regular updates from the team in South Africa that's been working on my project with me. And we are moving now into the final render stage of the characters and all the scenes and everything like that. We're probably, I would say, about 70% done with the video portion of it. And once we're done with the full render of the video, it will go into the final sound design and music mastering phase. So if we're able to keep up the pace that we have right now, hopefully by this time next month, we should have the first one done, the first 8-minute teaser of Seed. And of course, that has me extremely excited because, this is something I've been working on for, a decade, pretty much nonstop. So seeing it finally come to some measure of fruition has been extremely exciting. And we were talking last week about the Admobile that I created, and that Chris Pontius, I contracted him to build it for me, and he did an amazing job with that. And so literally all week long, I've been working on the Admobile website, and that's at
Awesome.
youradmobile.com. If you go to youradmobile.com, if anybody wants to get their message out to the Dallas area, we have 6 big routes that we do, whole lots of stuff there. Just did a little promo video the other day. We went out and shot footage of the truck driving around town. It's about a minute little video there showing what the truck does. So I get all this done and all this stuff's happening, and now, then I watch the news and see what's going on geopolitically, and I'm like, this would really stink if after 51 years of my life working on all these things, I finally start to achieve something in my life, and tomorrow's the end of the world. it would suck so bad. You know what I mean? I was kind of bugged out. This was Tuesday. Tuesday night, I was telling Sheila, man, I've got all these things that. The Admobile, I've been dreaming about this thing for 20 years, Seed 10 years, and working all these things forever. Finally start to see them.
Your mic's going in and out, brother.
Oh, that thing's somebody.
Is that better? I'm not sure why, but
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Audio of the other thing going. Yeah, it's just like I got all these things going on, and finally starting to achieve something here, and I'm like, man, if tomorrow's the end of the world, that's gonna if we're going to spend the rest of our life in running from FEMA camps and stuff like that, that's going to really
Right. Oh, gosh, I know.
So,
I'm praying for stability, peace, Safety, comfort, all the, normal stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was trying to do. I was like, Father, I do believe you're faithful to complete what you begin. And, you've begun all these things, certainly in my life and many people, other people that I know as well, have very huge projects that, they've been working on and are only now finally starting to see breakthrough. And I'm like, Father, what's happening here? So, I prayed about it Tuesday night, and then Wednesday, Mike Smith, for those of you guys who are listening that don't know, he's the primary driving force behind the documentary Out of Shadows, and career stuntman for, he worked in Hollywood for decades. He literally knows everybody. He says, when it comes to cast and crew and like all the names that you see at the end of the movies, all the credits, he's like, dude, I know an army of people that I could call at any minute, to work with us, and his vision, he said when he came to Christ, the first book he ended up reading before the Bible was the book of Enoch. And he's like, I'm so glad I read Enoch first, because it helped me to understand the Bible so much better, I think, than if I would have started with the Bible and not had Enoch as a foundation. Certainly, I mean, when you get to Genesis 6, and of course, the better part of the Torah and going into Joshua, if you don't understand the Genesis 6 narrative in light of what Enoch teaches, you really get. I was tweaked out myself for most of my life. I was a New Testament Bible believing Christian, and would go into the Old Testament every now and then, but then it's like there's God killing everybody. It's like
right.
Because if you don't understand the angelic view and what was going on in Genesis chapter 6, he seems like a schizophrenic, prejudiced, genocidal maniac. Until you realize what's really going on there, and okay, so he said, and he started looking online, trying to understand his new faith better, and he found various teachers. Then they stumbled across our stuff and the whole series we did on the Book of Enoch. And so he's like, dude, I watched every one of those videos, like maybe even a couple of times, the whole
awesome
series. And so he was like, man, I watched all this stuff, and meanwhile I'm over in the background. I'd watched Out of Shadows, and I was intrigued. I thought it was a great documentary, and watching a lot of interviews with him and some of the other people that were in it, talking about the project. And at one point, I don't remember if it was in the film or in one of the interviews, he said, we knew going into this project that our careers were done, that we were finished.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching that and I'm going, nah, you just don't know you're going to be working with me yet. You could be working
right on, yeah.
Seed, And so I had that rolling around in my head for a while. And then one day, after months, I was like, I'm just going to take a shot and try to reach out to this guy. And I found their Facebook group page, and I just posted basically what I said just now, and say, hey, listen, I got this project I think you might be interested in, and give me a call sometime. It was like 20 minutes, maybe 30, an hour at the most. Later, he calls me. His wife was managing the Facebook, and she said, yeah, this guy, Rob Skiba, wants to contact you. He's like, Rob Skiba wants to contact me? He called me back right away. And, we've been in contact for, a few months now, but he was coming down to Dallas because there's a group of people out there, and everything that's happened this year has only accelerated what I'm about to say. But there's been a need for a long time for us as believers to have our own distribution channels and our own, there's PureFlix and there's things like that, but no, we need something that is more comparable to like a Netflix, with distribution like Sony, but our own, because the biggest problem with like Christian projects, so-called Christian projects, Christian filmmakers and Christian music and whatever, is they, Scripture says the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. So why is the righteous giving all their money to the wicked? We make these movies and go to Sony, and Sony takes all the money. You're lucky if you make you break even, and they take all the profits to go make crap.
Right.
He's got a big vision for building a whole studio system and everything in Nashville, and having total control over distribution. And he wants to make $150 million budget plus movie of Enoch. And
awesome.
He's like, dude, like you and Zen, man. He said to say hi, by the way. But yeah, he called me.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, he texted me Tuesday night. He's like, hey, dude, I'm going to be in town. Can you meet tomorrow, which was yesterday at 11:30. I'm like, yeah, just tell me where. And so I finally get to meet him. He walks me into the building, and as soon as he walks me into the conference room where we're going to have our meeting, I see on the table a couple of mugs that say sozo something. I forget what else was on there, but it says sozo. Well, that's the Greek word for salvation, saved, healed, and delivered, used 118 times in the New Testament. Well, and Sheila and I, we wanted to have a sozo wedding when we got married on 777. We told our pastor to preach a 10-minute message on forgiveness, healing, deliverance, and salvation. And then we wanted to minister to our audience because we had over 300 people there. And we had some people from our church volunteer with us to be prayer partners with us. And we stepped down from the stage and we played some music. We had a band there, and we ministered to our audience. And my mom got healed. 15 years, she had a disease that they told her she wouldn't live for 15 years. She got healed. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was a powerful deal. Well, one of the guys that was part of our prayer team, as soon as I sat down at the table, he comes walking out the door that was on the other side of the table from another conference room. I'm like, Joe? He's like, dude. So, and then another guy walks through, this guy Yako that I've known for a while, and he's another big connector. I mean, he knows he's in with everybody. He walks in, it was like I knew half the people there. Just had like about a 3-hour amazing meeting of the minds and a reunion with people I haven't seen in about a decade. So
that's awesome, man.
Yesterday was a massive blessing that gave me the shot in the arm that I needed, non-vaccination wise, to get me very excited about the future. And here's the thing, man. As long as they're making The Mandalorian and all these other TV shows, they're not quitting. So there's no reason why we should.
No, not at all. Yeah, we just keep pushing forth, and see what happens. Just trust the Most High.
So tonight, I thought I was looking at where we left off, and I thought I would start with Jubilees chapter 17, because that's the Jubilees version of what we read last week in Genesis.
Sounds good.
So we have about 8 minutes. Let's see how far I can get here. Jubilees chapter 17. And in the first year of the 5th week, Isaac was weaned in this Jubilee, and Abraham made a great banquet in the 3rd month on the day his son Isaac was weaned. And Ishmael, the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, was before the face of Abraham, his father, in his place. And Abraham rejoiced and blessed God because he had seen his sons and had not died childless. And he remembered the words which he had spoken to him on the day on which Lot had departed from him. And he rejoiced because the Lord had given him seed upon the earth to inherit the earth. And he blessed with all his mouth the creator of all things. And Sarah saw Ishmael playing and dancing, and Abraham rejoicing with great joy. And she became jealous of Ishmael and said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman will not be heir with my son Isaac. And the thing was grievous in Abraham's sight because of his maidservant and because of his son, that he should drive them from him. And God said to Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight, because of the child and because of the bondwoman. And all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken to her words and do them. For in Isaac shall thy name and seed be called. But as for the son of this bondwoman, I will make him a great nation, because he is of thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and placed them on the shoulders of Hagar and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the bottle was spent, and the child thirsted and was not able to go on, and fell down. And the mother took him and cast him under an olive tree, and went and sat her down over against him at the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of my child. And as she sat, she wept. And an angel of God, one of the holy ones, said unto her, why weepest thou, Hagar? Arise, take the child, and hold him in thine hand. For God hath heard thy voice, and hath seen the child. And she opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled her bottle with water, and she gave her child to drink. And she arose and went towards the wilderness of Paran. And the child grew and became an archer, and God was with him. And his mother took him a wife from among the daughters of Egypt. And she bare him a son, and she called his name Nebaioth, or something like that. For she said, the Lord was nigh to me when I called upon him. And it came to pass in the 7th week, in the 1st year thereof, in the 1st month in this Jubilee, on the 12th of this month, there were voices in heaven regarding Abraham, that he was faithful in all that he told him, and that he loved the Lord, and that in every affliction he was faithful. And the prince Mastema came and said before God, behold, Abraham loves Isaac his son, and he delights in him above all things. Bid him offer him as a burnt offering on the altar, and thou wilt see if he will do this command, and thou wilt know if he is faithful in everything wherein thou dost try him. And the Lord said to Abraham, and the Lord knew that Abraham was faithful in all his afflictions, for he had tried him through his country and with famine, and had tried him with the wealth of kings, and had tried him again through his wife when she was torn from him, and with circumcision, and had tried him through Ishmael and Hagar, his maidservant, when he sent them away. And in everything wherein he had tried him, he was found faithful, and his soul was not impatient, and he was not slow to act, for he was faithful and a lover of the Lord. That's a good setup for Genesis narrative. Let me see if I can switch over. We'll skip over to Genesis, the next chapter. A second. Oops. That will take us to Genesis chapter 22. And I'll give that a shot too. And it came to pass after these things that God tempted Abraham and said unto Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering. And he rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, my father. And he said, here am I, my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they went to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seest thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, for me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven a second time, and said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor, Huz his firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Reumah, Sheber also Tiba and Gaham and Thahash and Ma'akash. And that finishes right before the break.
All right.
Just in time. We've got about a minute before we go to break here. So, yeah, we could camp out on this one for a while. So when we come back from the break, if you want to, you got some stuff you can.
Yeah, I'll do the Targum first and then go into some other accounts that are focused on the same story.
Very, very cool.
Excellent.
All right. So we're going to have to tap dance for about 30 seconds here.
Yeah, no worries. I believe I've got a few set up. The Legends of the Jews, the Writings of Abraham, the Targum, and I'll check the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets as well.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Then that'll take us into the break, and you'll have it when we come back.
All right. Sounds good.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. And right before the break, I read from Jubilees chapter 17 and Genesis 22. And now I will turn it over to you, Zen. You can read from the Targums or whatever else you might have that could elaborate on what we just read.
All right. I have a few parallel accounts, but we'll start with the Targum chapter 22. And it was after these things that Isaac and Ishmael contended. And Ishmael said, "It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am his firstborn son." And Isaac said, "It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am the son of Sarah, his wife, and thou art the son of Hagar, the handmaid of my mother." Ishmael answered and said, "I am more righteous than thou, because I was circumcised at 13 years. And if it had been my will to hinder, they should not have delivered me to be circumcised. But thou wast circumcised a child 8 days. If thou hadst not had knowledge, perhaps they should not have delivered thee to be circumcised." Isaac responded and said, Behold now, today I am 36 years old, and if the Holy One, blessed be he, were to require all my members, I would not delay. These words were heard before the Lord of the world, and the word of the Lord at once tried Abraham, and said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "Behold me, Jerusalem." And it was after these things that the Lord tried Abraham with the 10th trial, and said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "Behold me." And he said, "Take now thy son, thy only one whom thou lovest, Isaac, and go into the land of worship, and offer him there a whole burnt offering upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee, Jerusalem, at Mount Moriah." And Abraham rose up in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 young men with him, Eleazar and Ishmael, and Isaac his son, and cut the small wood and the figs and the palm, which are provided for the whole burnt offering, and arose and went to the land which the Lord had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and beheld the cloud of glory fuming on the mount, and it was discerned by him afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, "Wait you here with the ass, and I and the young man will proceed yonder, to prove if that which was promised shall be established. So shall be thy sons, and we will worship the Lord of the world, and return to you." And Abraham took the wood of the offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son, and in his hand he took the fire and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake to Abraham his father, and said, "My father." And he said, "I am." And he said, "Behold the fire and the wood. Where is the lamb for the offering?" And Abraham said, "The Lord will choose for himself a lamb for the offering." And they went both of them in heart entirely as one. Jerusalem. And Abraham said, "The word of the Lord will prepare for me a lamb. And if not, then thou art the offering, my son." And they went both of them together with a contrite heart. And they came to the place of which the Lord had told them. And Abraham builded there the altar which Adam had built, which had been destroyed by the waters of the deluge, which Noah had again builded, and which had been destroyed in the age of divisions. And he set the wood in order upon it, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And Isaac answered and said to his father, "Bind me properly, aright, lest I tremble from the affliction of my soul, and be cast into the pit of destruction, and there be found profaneness in thy offering." Now the eyes of Abraham looked on the eyes of Isaac, but the eyes of Isaac looked towards the angels on high. And Isaac beheld them, but Abraham saw them not. And the angels answered on high, "Come, behold how these solitary ones, who are in the world, kill the one the other. He who slayeth delays not. He who is to be slain reacheth forth his neck. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to, Jerusalem. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay Isaac his son. Isaac answered and said to Abraham his father, My father, bind my hands rightly, lest in the hour of my affliction I tremble and confuse thee, and thy offering be found profane, and I be cast into the pit of destruction in the world to come. Now the eyes of Abraham reached unto the eyes of Isaac, but the eyes of Isaac reaching to the angels on high. And Isaac beheld them, but Abraham saw them not. In that hour came forth the angels on high, and said these to these, Come, behold 2 righteous ones alone in the midst of the world. The one slayeth, the other is slain. He who slayeth deferreth not, and he who is to be slain stretcheth out his neck. And the angel of the Lord called to him from the heavens, and said to him, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Behold me, Jerusalem. And he said, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham answered in the language of the sanctuary, and said, Behold me. And he said, Stretch not out thy hand upon the young man, neither do him any evil. For now it is manifest before me that thou fearest the Lord, neither hast thou withheld thy son, the only begotten, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a certain ram which had been created between the evenings of the foundation of the world was held in the entanglement of a tree by his horns. And Abraham went and took him and offered him an offering instead of his son. And Abraham gave thanks and prayed there in that place and said, I pray through the mercies thou art before thee, O Lord, before whom it is manifest that it was not in the depth of my heart to turn away from doing thy decree with joy, that when the children of Isaac, my son, shall offer in the hour of affliction, this may be a memorial for them, and thou mayest hear them and deliver them, and that all generations to come may say, In this mountain Abraham bound Isaac his son, and there the Shekinah of the Lord was revealed unto him. Jerusalem. And Abraham prayed in the name of the word of the Lord, and said, Thou art the Lord who seest, and art not seen. I pray for mercy before thee, O Lord. It is wholly manifest and known before thee, that in my heart there was no dividing, in the time that thou didst command me to offer Isaac my son, and to make him dust and ashes before thee. But that forthwith I arose in the morning, and performed thy word with joy, and I have fulfilled thy word. And now I pray for mercies before thee, O Lord God, that when the children of Isaac offer in the hour of need the binding of Isaac their father, thou mayest remember on their behalf, and remit and forgive their sins, and deliver them out of all need, that the generations who are to arise after him may say, In the mountain of the house of the sanctuary of the Lord did Abraham offer Isaac his son, and in this mountain of the house of the sanctuary was revealed unto him the glory of the Shekinah of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham the second time from the heavens, and said, By my word have I sworn, saith the Lord, for as much as thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only begotten, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy sons as the stars of the heavens, and they shall be as the sand which is upon the shore of the sea, and thy sons shall inherit the cities before their enemies, and all the peoples of the earth shall be blessed through the righteousness of thy son, because thou hast obeyed my word. And the angels on high took Isaac and brought him into the school, the Madrasha of Shem the Great, and he was there 3 years. And in the same day Abraham returned to his young men, And they arose and went together to the well of the seven, and Abraham dwelt at Beer-sheba. And it was after these things, after Abraham had bound Isaac, that Satana came and told unto Sarah that Abraham had killed Isaac. And Sarah arose and cried out, and was strangled, and died from agony. But Abraham had come, and was resting in the way. And it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah also hath borne, she hath enlargement through the righteousness of her sister. For bring forth sons unto Nahor thy brother, Uz his firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Camel, master of the Armenian magicians, and Keshed, and Chazo, and Pildash, and Jildalf, and Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 bare Milcah to Nahor, the brother of Abraham, and his concubine, whose name was Ruema. She also bare Tebach, and Gashem, and Tishash, and Macha, Jerusalem, and his concubine, and her name. And that is it. And that was a fragmented last portion there.
Interesting stuff there. Toward the end, it sounded like, because I'll read the Joshua account in a minute, but it sounded like
Sure.
After the event where the ram was there and he was spared, it says he went 3 years into the house of Shem.
Yes, Shem the Great, yes. And the angels on high took Isaac and brought him into the school, the Medrasha of Shem the Great. And he was there 3 years. Yeah.
And then,
interesting.
But after that, if you keep reading there, Sarah, and after after Abraham had bound Isaac, that's okay. And after these things, after Abraham bound Isaac, Satan told Sarah that Abraham killed Isaac. Because in the Joshua account, it sounds like, she's looking for Isaac, and then this Satan shows up and says, "Oh yeah, your husband's gone to go kill him," and she's going crazy about it. But this makes it seem like after 3 years that happened. I guess you could read it both ways, though. And after these things, after Abraham, Isaac unto.
Yeah, because I think in the other accounts, it's also Satan who tells her that Abraham has gone to kill Isaac. And so then she goes to follow to try to stop it. And then here, he disguised as an old man, he went and told her again that Isaac had been killed. And she doesn't even make it to where, because she loves him so much, it literally broke her heart. And when Abraham and Isaac, according to the other story, which I guess I'll get into that next, but when they are returning, they find Sarah has passed away, and then they both grieve. But so there's not a mention of his going to the school for 3 years. Maybe, after that, it was that he was led. But according to the other story, after this incident, returning home, they find on the way that Sarah has passed.
Yeah, scanning through Joshua 21. Let's see if there's anything else based on what you read. That we talked about it last week. That interesting that the lamb was there. It was prepared for in between 2 evenings at the foundation of the world. And you said something last week that I don't remember what text you're reading, but there was a belief that this animal had actually been around. Presumably had made it onto the ark, but had been around for thousands of years.
Since the beginning. Yeah, right.
Creation.
Right. I think that was the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets.
Yeah.
Reading from that text. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. That it could have been a semi-immortal lamp walking around for thousands of years, making it onto the ark. What a cool story, though. I mean, if that's true.
Or if or if he was just, kept, because like some of the other things, God kept, possibly, I'm not saying this is the way it is, but maybe he kept this lamb or this ram in heaven, in paradise, yeah, and then provided it there in the thicket as the offering for that particular occasion.
Yeah, that could be another possibility, I suppose.
Right.
All right, well, the other thing that caught my attention was Kemuel, master of the Aramean magicians.
Yeah.
I heard that. Is there anything more on that anywhere that you're aware of?
Not that I recall right offhand, but perhaps when we look into these parallel accounts, there will be mention.
Because you were reading from the Targum, right?
Yeah, this is the Targum, right?
So,
chapter 22.
So that's a direct translation of the Torah. And so for it to specifically say, oh yeah, here's this character who's the master of the Aramean magicians, that stands out then as, of course they all knew it when they read it, but makes me go, who's this guy?
Right.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, it's little details like that help you to, well, it certainly intrigues you, it makes you want to know more.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me jump into Joshua chapter 21 then. And it was at that time, at the end of a year and 4 months of Abraham's dwelling in the land of the Philistines in Gerar, that God visited Sarah, and the Lord remembered her, and she conceived and bare a son to Abraham. And Abraham called the name of the son which was born to him, which Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac at 8 days old, as God had commanded Abraham to do, unto his seed after him. And Abraham was 100 and Sarah 90 years old when Isaac was born to them. And the child grew up, and he was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast upon the day that Isaac was weaned. And Shem and Eber and all the great people of the land, and Abimelech king of the Philistines and his servants, and Phicol the captain of his host, came to eat and drink and rejoice at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of his son Isaac being weaned. Also Terah the father of Abraham, and Nahor his brother, came from Haran, they and all belonging to them, and they greatly rejoiced on hearing that a son had been born to Sarah. And they came to Abraham, and they ate and drank at the feast which Abraham made upon the day of Isaac's being weaned. And Terah and Nahor rejoiced with Abraham, and they remained with him many days in the land of the Philistines. At that time Serug, son of Reu, died, in the first year of the birth of Isaac, son of Abraham. And all the days of Serug were 239 years, and he died. And Ishmael, the son of Abraham, was grown up in those days. He was 14 years old when Sarah bare Isaac to Abraham. And God was with Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and he grew up, and he learned to use the bow and became an archer. And when Isaac was 5 years old, he was sitting with Ishmael at the door of the tent. And Ishmael came to Isaac and seated himself opposite to him, and he took the bow and drew it and put the arrow in it and intended to slay Isaac. And Sarah saw the act which Ishmael desired to do to her son Isaac, and it grieved her exceedingly on account of her son. And she sent for Abraham and said to him, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for her son shall not be heir with my son, for thus did he seek to do unto him this day. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah, and he rose up early in the morning, and he took 12 loaves and a bottle of water, which he gave to Hagar, and sent her away with her son. And Hagar went with her son to the wilderness, and they dwelt in the wilderness of Paran with the inhabitants of the wilderness. And Ishmael was an archer, and he dwelt in the wilderness a long time. And he and his mother afterward went to the land of Egypt, and they dwelt there. And Hagar took a wife for her son from Egypt, and her name was Meribah. And the wife of Ishmael conceived and bare 4 sons and 2 daughters. And Ishmael and his mother and his wife and children afterward went and returned to the wilderness. And they made themselves tents in the wilderness, in which they dwelt. And they continued to travel and then to rest monthly and yearly. And God gave Ishmael flocks and herds and tents on account of Abraham his father. And the man increased in cattle. And Ishmael dwelt in deserts and in tents, traveling and resting for a long time. And he did not see the face of his father. And in some time after, Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, I will go and see my son Ishmael, for I have a desire to see him, for I have not seen him for a long time. And Abraham rode upon one of his camels to the wilderness to seek his son Ishmael, for he heard that he was dwelling in a tent in the wilderness with all belonging to him. And Abraham went to the wilderness, and he reached the tent of Ishmael about noon. And he asked for Ishmael, and he found the wife of Ishmael sitting in the tent with her children. And Ishmael, her husband, and his mother were not with them. And Abraham asked the wife of Ishmael, saying, Where has Ishmael gone? And she said, He has gone to the field to hunt. And Abraham was still mounted upon the camel, for he would not get off to the ground, as he had sworn to his mother, or to his wife Sarah, that he would not get off from the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, My daughter, give me a little water that I may drink, for I am fatigued from the journey. And Ishmael's wife answered and said to Abraham, We have neither water nor bread. And she continued sitting in the tent and did not notice Abraham. Neither did she ask him who he was. But she was beating her children in the tent, and she was cursing them. And she also cursed her husband Ishmael, and reproached him. And Abraham heard the words of Ishmael's wife to her children, and he was very angry and displeased. And Abraham called to the woman to come out to him from the tent, and the woman came and stood opposite to Abraham. And Abraham was still mounted upon the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, When thy husband Ishmael returneth home, say these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither to seek thee, and thus was his appearance and figure. I did not ask him who he was, and seeing thou wast not here, he spoke unto me and said, When Ishmael thy husband returneth, tell him, Thus did this man say, When thou comest home, put away this nail of the tent which thou hast placed here, and place another nail in its stead. And Abraham finished his instructions to the woman, and he turned and went off on the camel homeward. And after that, Ishmael came from the chase, he and his mother, and returned to the tent. And his wife spoke these words to him, A very old man from the land of the Philistines came to seek thee, and thus was his appearance and figure, and I did not ask him who he was. And seeing thou wast not at home, he said to me, When the husband cometh home, tell him, Thus saith the old man, Put away the nail of the tent which thou hast placed here, and place another nail in its stead. And Ishmael heard the words of his wife, and he knew that it was his father, and that his wife did not honor him. And Ishmael understood his father's words that he had spoken to his wife. And Ishmael hearkened to the voice of his father. And Ishmael cast off that woman, and she went away. And Ishmael afterward went to the land of Canaan, and he took another wife, and he brought her to his tent, to the place where he then dwelt. And at the end of 3 years, Abraham said, I will go again and see Ishmael my son, for I have not seen him for a while. And he rode upon his camel and went to the wilderness, and he reached the tent of Ishmael about noon. And he asked after Ishmael, and his wife came out of the tent and said, He is not here, my lord, for he has gone to hunt in the fields and to feed the camels. And the woman said to Abraham, Turn in, my lord, into the tent, and eat a morsel of bread, for thy soul must be wearied on account of the journey. And Abraham said to her, I will not stop, for I am in haste to continue my journey, but give me a little water to drink, for I have thirst. And the woman hastened and ran into the tent, and she brought out water and bread to Abraham, which she placed before him, and she urged him to eat. And he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted, and he blessed his son Ishmael. He said, he finished his meal and blessed the Lord, and he said to Ishmael's wife, When Ishmael cometh home, say these words to him, A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither, and he asked after thee, and thou wast not here. And I brought him out bread and water, and he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted. And he spoke these words to me, When Ishmael thy husband cometh home, say unto him, The nail of the tent which thou hast is very good. Do not put it away from the tent. And Abraham finished commanding the woman, and he rode off to his home to the land of the Philistines. And when Ishmael came to his tent, his wife went forth to meet him with joy and a cheerful heart. And she said to him, An old man came here from the land of the Philistines, and thus was his appearance. And he asked after thee, and thou wast not here. So I brought out bread and water, and he ate and drank, and his heart was comforted. And he spoke these words to me, When Ishmael thy husband cometh home, say to him, The nail of the tent which thou hast is very good. Do not put it away from the tent. And Ishmael knew that it was his father, and that his wife had honored him, and the Lord blessed Ishmael. We got about a minute and a half before we go to break. So that it's a review essentially of what I don't know if it was the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets.
Patriarchs, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was.
I can't remember. Did you read from the? I don't remember if you read from the Legends of the Jews last week. I know you read Legends of the Patriarchs and Prophets and the Writings of Abraham and the Targum. But I don't remember if you read anything from Legends of the Jews.
I'm not positive. I am in that book at the birth of Isaac. Yeah, I did actually.
So you did. You read from.
Yeah,
that's probably where. I mean, it was one of those.
It was about Abimelech.
Okay, yeah, because usually either the Legends of the Patriarchs and Prophets or the Legends of the Jews backs up Joshua.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it was the Patriarchs and the Prophets that story came forth.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity, but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we are going into the second hour of the broadcast already. As usual, this is flying by. I thought I would go ahead and read Joshua 22 because that gets us caught up to where we are in Genesis. So Let me switch over here. Joshua 22. And Ishmael then rose up and took his wife and his children and his cattle and all belonging to him. And he journeyed from there, and he went to his father in the land of the Philistines. And Abraham related to Ishmael his son the transaction with the first wife that Ishmael took according to what she did. And Ishmael and his children dwelt with Abraham many days in that land. And Abraham dwelt in the land of the Philistines a long time. And the days increased and reached 26 years. And after that, Abraham and his servants and all belonging to him went from the land of the Philistines and removed to a great distance. And they came near to Hebron, and they remained there. And the servants of Abraham dug wells of water, and Abraham and all belonging to him dwelt by the water. And the servants of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard the report that Abraham's servants had dug wells of water in the borders of the land. And they came and quarreled with the servants of Abraham, and they robbed them of the great well which they had dug. And Abimelech, king of the Philistines, heard of this affair, and he with Phicol, the captain of his host, and 20 of his men came to Abraham. And Abimelech spoke to Abraham concerning his servants, and Abraham rebuked Abimelech concerning the well of which his servants had robbed him. And Abimelech said to Abraham, As the Lord who liveth, who created the whole earth, I did not hear of the act which my servants did unto thy servants until this day. And Abraham took 7 ewe lambs and gave them to Abimelech, saying, Take these, I pray thee, from my hands, that it may be a testimony for me that I dug this well. And Abimelech took the 7 ewe lambs which Abraham had given to him, for he had also given him cattle and herds in abundance. And Abimelech swore to Abraham concerning the well. Therefore he called that well Beersheba, for there they both swore concerning it. And they both made a covenant in Beersheba. And Abimelech rose up with Phicol, the captain of his hosts, and all his men, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham and all belonging to him dwelt in Beersheba, and he was in that land a long time. And Abraham planted a large grove in Beersheba, and he made to it 4 gates facing the 4 sides of the earth. And he planted a vineyard in it, so that if a traveler came to Abraham, he entered any gate which was in his road, and remained there, and ate and drank, and satisfied himself, and then departed. For the house of Abraham was always open to the sons of men that passed and repassed, who came daily to eat and drink in the house of Abraham. And any man who had hunger and came to Abraham's house, Abraham would give him bread that he might eat and drink and be satisfied. And anyone that came naked to his house, he would clothe with garments as he might choose, and give him silver and gold, and make known to him the Lord, who had created him in the earth. This did Abraham all his life. And Abraham and his children and all belonging to him dwelt in Beersheba, and he pitched his tent as far as Hebron. And Abraham's brother Nahor and his father and all belonging to him dwelt in Haran, for they did not come with Abraham to the land of Canaan. And children were born to Nahor, which Milcah the daughter of Haran, and sister to Sarah, Abraham's wife, bare to him. And these are the names of those that were born to him: Uz, Buz, Kemuel, Kesad, Chezo, Pildash, Tildaph, and Bethuel. 8 sons. These are the children of Milcah, which she bare to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And Nahor had a concubine, and her name was Reumah. And she also bare to Nahor Zabak, Gachash, Takhash, and Maachat, being 4 sons. And the children that were born to Nahor were 12 sons besides his daughters, and they also had children born to him in Haran. And the children of Uz, the firstborn of Nahor, were Abi, Cheruf, Gaden, Milas, and Deborah their sister. And the sons of Buz were Berachel, Naamath, Shiva, and Meduno. And the sons of Kemuel were Aram and Rechab. And the sons of Kesad were Anamlech, Mishai, Binam, and Yiphi. The sons of Chazo were Pildash, Meki, and Ophir. And the sons of Pildash were Arud, Shimum, Mirad, and Moloch. And the sons of Tidlaph were Mushan, Kushan, and Mutzi. And the children of Bethuel were Sekur, Laban, and their sister Rebekah. These are the families of the children of Nahor that were born to them in Haran. And Aram, the son of Kemuel, and Rechab his brother, went away from Haran, and they found a valley in the land by the river Euphrates. And they built a city there, and they called the name of the city after the name of Pethor, the son of Aram, that is Aram Naharaim, unto this day. And the children of Kesed also went to dwell where they could find a place, and they went and they found a valley opposite the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they there built themselves a city, and they called the name of the city Kesed after the name of their father, that is the land Kasdim, unto this day. And the Kasdim dwelt in that land, and they were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. And Terah, father of Nahor and Abraham, went and took another wife in his old age, and her name was Pelilah. And she conceived and bare him a son, and he called his name Zobah. And Terah lived 25 years after he begat Zobah. And Terah died in that year, that is the 35th year of the birth of Isaac, son of Abraham. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and he was buried in Haran. And Zobah, the son of Terah, lived 30 years, and he begat Aram, Iklis, and Merek. And Aram, son of Zeboah, son of Terah, had 3 wives, and he begat 12 sons and 3 daughters. And the Lord gave to Aram, the son of Zobah, riches and possessions and abundance of cattle and flocks and herds, and the man increased greatly. And Aram, the son of Zobah, and his brother and all his household journeyed from Haran, and they went to dwell where they should find a place, for their property was too great to remain in Haran. For they could not stop in Haran together with their brethren, the children of Nahor. And Aram, the son of Zobah, went with his brethren, and they found a valley at a distance toward the eastern country, and they dwelt there. And they also built a city there, and they called the name thereof Aram, after the name of their eldest brother, that is Aram Zobah, to this day. And Isaac, the son of Abraham, was growing up in those days, and Abraham his father taught him the way of the Lord, to know the Lord, and the Lord was with him. And when Isaac was 37 years old, Ishmael his brother was going about with him in the tent. And Ishmael boasted to himself to Isaac, saying, I was 13 years old when the Lord spoke to my father to circumcise us, and I did according to the word of the Lord which he spoke to my father. And I gave my soul unto the Lord, and I did not transgress his word which he commanded my father. And Isaac answered Ishmael, saying, Why dost thou boast to me about this, about a little bit of thy flesh which thou didst take from thy body, concerning which the Lord commanded thee? As the Lord liveth, the God of my father Abraham, if the Lord should say unto my father, Take now thy son Isaac, and bring him up an offering before me, I would not refrain, but I would joyfully accede to it. And the Lord heard the word that Isaac spoke to Ishmael, and it seemed good in the sight of the Lord, and he thought to try Abraham in this matter. And the day arrived when the sons of God came and placed themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with the sons of God before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said to Satan, What is thy word to me concerning all the children of the earth? And Satan answered the Lord and said, I have seen all the children of the earth who serve thee and remember thee when they require anything from thee. And when thou givest them the thing which they require from thee, they sit at their ease and forsake thee, and they remember thee no more. Hast thou seen Abraham, the son of Terah, who at first had no children, and he served thee and erected altars to thee wherever he came, and he brought up offerings upon them, and he proclaimed thy name continually to all the children of the earth. And now that his son Isaac is born to him, he has forsaken thee. He has made a great feast for all the inhabitants of the land, and the Lord he has forgotten. For amidst all that he has done, he brought thee no offering, neither burnt offering, nor peace offering, neither ox, lamb, nor goat, of all that he killed on the day that his son was weaned. Even from the time of his son's birth till now, being 37 years, he built no altar before thee, nor brought any offering to thee. For he saw that thou didst give what he requested before thee, and he therefore forsook thee. And the Lord said to Satan, Hast thou thus considered my servant Abraham? For there is none like him upon the earth, a perfect and an upright man before me, one that feareth God and avoideth evil. As I live, were I to say unto him, Bring up Isaac thy son before me, he would not withhold him from me. Much more if I told him to bring up a burnt offering before me from his flock or herds. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Speak then now unto Abraham as thou hast said, and thou wilt see whether he will not this day transgress and cast aside thy words. I could continue unless you've got something that would parallel it.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Continue.
Chapter 23. At that time, the word of the Lord came to Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which shall be shown to thee. For there wilt thou see a cloud and the glory of the Lord. And Abraham said within himself, How shall I separate my son Isaac from Sarah his mother, in order to bring him up for a burnt offering before the Lord? And Abraham came into the tent, and he sat before Sarah his wife, and he spoke these words to her. My son Isaac is grown up, and he has not for some time studied the service of his God. Now tomorrow I will go and bring him to Shem, and Eber his son, and there he will learn the ways of the Lord, for they will teach him to know the Lord, as well as to know that when he prayeth continually before the Lord, he will answer him. Therefore, there he will know the way of serving the Lord his God. And Sarah said, Thou hast spoken well. Go, my Lord, and do unto him as thou hast said. But remove him not at a great distance from me, neither let him remain there too long, for my soul is bound within his soul. And Abraham said unto Sarah, My daughter, let us pray to the Lord our God, that he may do good with us. And Sarah took her son Isaac, and he abode all that night with her, and she kissed and embraced him, and gave him instructions till morning. And she said to him, O my son, how can my soul separate itself from thee? And she still kissed him and embraced him, and she gave Abraham instructions concerning him. And Sarah said to Abraham, O my Lord, I pray thee, take heed of my son, and place thine eyes over him, for I have no other son nor daughter but him. O forsake him not. If he be hungry, give him bread, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. Do not let him go on foot, neither let him sit in the sun. Neither let him, oh, for crying out loud, the dude's 30-something years old. Cut the cord, woman. Neither let him go by himself in the road, neither force him from whatever he may desire, but do unto him as he may say to thee. And Sarah wept bitterly and the whole night on account of Isaac, and she gave him instructions till morning. And in the morning Sarah selected a very fine and beautiful garment, and from those garments which she had in the house, that Abimelech had given to her. And she dressed Isaac her son therewith, and she put a turban upon his head, and she enclosed a precious stone in the top of the turban, and she gave him provision for the road. And they went forth, and Isaac went with his father Abraham, and some of their servants accompanied them to see them off the road. And Sarah went out with them, and she accompanied them upon the road to see them off. And they said to her, Return to the tent. And when Sarah heard the words of her son Isaac, she wept bitterly. And Abraham her husband wept with her, and their son wept with them a great weeping. Also those who went with them wept greatly. And Sarah caught hold of her son Isaac, and she held him in her arms, and she embraced him and continued to weep with him. And Sarah said, Who knoweth if after this day I shall ever see thee again? And they still wept together, Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, and all those that accompanied them on the road wept with them. And Sarah afterward turned away from her son, weeping bitterly, and all her men servants and maidservants returned with her to the tent. And Abraham went with Isaac his son to bring him up as an offering before the Lord, as he had commanded him. And Abraham took 2 of his young men with him, Ishmael the son of Hagar, and Eliezer his servant. And they went together with them. And whilst they were walking in the road, the young men spoke these words to themselves. And Ishmael said to Eliezer, Now my father Abraham is going with Isaac to bring him up for a burnt offering to the Lord, as he commanded him. Now when he returneth, he will give unto me all that he possesses, to inherit after him, for I am his firstborn. And Eliezer answered Ishmael and said, Surely Abraham did cast thee away with thy mother, and swear that thou shouldest not inherit anything of all he possesses. And to whom will he give all that he has, with all his treasures, but unto me, his servant, who has been faithful in his house, who has served him night and day, and has done all that he desired me? To me will he bequeath at his death all that he possesses. And whilst Abraham was proceeding with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very old, aged man, humble and of a contrite spirit. And he approached Abraham and said to him, Art thou silly or brutish, that thou goest to do this thing this day to thine only son? For God gave thee a son in thy latter days, in thy old age. And wilt thou go and slaughter him this day because he committed no violence? And wilt thou cause the soul of thine only son to perish upon or from the earth? Dost thou not know and understand that this thing cannot be from the Lord? For the Lord cannot do unto man such evil upon earth to say to him, Go slaughter thy child. And Abraham heard this, and he knew it was the word of Satan, who endeavored to draw him aside from the way of the Lord. But Abraham would not hearken to the voice of Satan. And Abraham rebuked him, so that he went away. And Satan returned and came to Isaac. And he appeared unto Isaac in the figure of a young man, comely and well favored. And he approached Isaac and said unto him, Dost thou not know and understand that thy old silly father bringeth thee to slaughter this day? For naught? Now therefore, my son, do not listen nor attend to him, for he is a silly old man. And let not thy precious soul and beautiful figure be lost from the earth. And Isaac heard this and said unto Abraham, Hast thou heard, my father, that which this man has spoken? Even thus has he spoken. And Abraham answered his son Isaac and said to him, Take heed of him, and do not listen to his words, nor attend to him, for he is Satan, endeavoring to draw us aside this day from the commands of God. And Abraham still rebuked Satan, and Satan went from them. And seeing he could not prevail over them, he hid himself from them, and he went and passed before them in the road. And he transformed himself to a large brook of water in the road. And Abraham and Isaac and his 2 young men reached that place, and they saw a brook large and powerful as the mighty waters. And they entered the brook and passed through it, and the waters at first reached their legs. And they went deeper in the brook, and the waters reached up to their necks. And they were all terrified on account of the water. And whilst they were going over the brook, Abraham recognized that place, and he knew that there was no water there before. And Abraham said to his son Isaac, I know this place in which there is no brook nor water. Now therefore it is this Satan who does all this to us, to draw us aside this day from the commands of God. And Abraham rebuked him, and said unto him, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan. Be gone from us, for we go by the commands of God. And Satan was terrified at the voice of Abraham, and he went away from them. And the place again became dry land, as it was at first. And Abraham went with Isaac toward the place that God had told him. And on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place at a distance which God had told him of. And a pillar of fire appeared to him that reached from the earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory upon the mountain. And the glory of the Lord was seen in the cloud. And Abraham said to Isaac, My son, dost thou see in that mountain which we perceive at a distance that which I see upon it? And Isaac answered and said unto his father, I see, and lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Lord is seen upon the cloud. And Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Lord for a burnt offering. And Abraham said unto Eliezer, unto Ishmael his son, Do you also see that which we see upon the mountain which is at a distance? And they answered and said, We see nothing more than like the other mountains of the earth. And Abraham knew that they were not accepted before the Lord to go with them. And Abraham said to them, Abide ye here with the ass, whilst I and Isaac my son will go to yonder mountain and worship there before the Lord, and then return to you. And Eliezer and Ishmael remained in that place, and Abraham was commanded. And Abraham took wood for a burnt offering and placed it upon his son Isaac. And he took the fire and the knife, and they both went to that place. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, Behold, I see here the fire and the wood, and where then is the lamb that is to be burnt, the burnt offering before the Lord? And Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, The Lord has made choice of thee, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb. And Isaac said unto his father, I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart. And Abraham said unto Isaac his son, Is there in thy heart any thought or counsel concerning this which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee. O my son, conceal it not from me. And Isaac answered his father Abraham, and said unto him, O my father, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate either to the right or to the left from the word that he has spoken to thee. Neither limb nor muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there in my heart any thought or evil counsel concerning this. But I am of joyful and cheerful heart in this matter, and I say, Blessed is the Lord, who has this day chosen me to be a burnt offering before him. And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Isaac, and they went on and came together to that place that the Lord had spoken of. And Abraham approached to build the altar in that place, and Abraham was weeping, and Isaac took stones and mortar until they had finished building the altar. And Abraham took the wood and placed it in order upon the altar which he had built. And he took his son Isaac and bound him in order to place him upon the wood which was upon the altar, to slay him for a burnt offering before the Lord. And Isaac said to his father, Bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and thereof profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so. And Isaac still said to his father, O my father, when thou shalt have slain me and burnt me for an offering, take with thee that which shall remain of my ashes to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, This is the sweet-smelling savor of Isaac. But do not tell her this if she should sit near a well or upon any high place, lest she should cast her soul after me and die. And Abraham heard the words of Isaac, and he lifted up his voice and wept when Isaac spake these words. And Abraham's tears gushed down upon Isaac, his son. And Isaac wept bitterly, and he said to his father, Hasten thou, O my father, and do with me the will of the Lord our God, as he has commanded thee. And the hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at this thing which the Lord commanded them, but the eye wept bitterly, whilst the heart rejoiced. And Abraham bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar upon the wood, and Isaac stretched forth his neck upon the altar before his father, and Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. At that time the angels of mercy came before the Lord and spake to him concerning Isaac, saying, O Lord, thou art a merciful and compassionate king over all that thou hast created in heaven and in earth, and thou supportest them all. Give therefore ransom and redemption instead of thy servant Isaac, and pity and have compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are this day performing thy commands. Hast thou seen, O Lord, how Isaac the son of Abraham thy servant is bound down to the slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let thy pity be roused for them, O Lord. At that time the Lord appeared to Abraham, and called to him from heaven, and said unto him, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God in performing this act, and in not withholding thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in a thicket by its horns, and that the ram which the Lord God had created in the earth in the day that he made the earth and heaven. For the Lord had prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. And this ram was advancing to Abraham when Satan caught hold of him and entangled his horns in the thicket, that he might not advance to Abraham, in order that Abraham might slay his son. And Abraham, seeing the ram advancing to him and Satan withholding him, fetched him and brought him before the altar. And he loosened his son Isaac from his binding, and he put the ram in his stead. And Abraham killed the ram upon the altar and brought it up as an offering in the place of his son Isaac. And Abraham sprinkled some of the blood of the ram upon the altar, and he exclaimed and said, This is in the place of my son, and may this be considered this day as the blood of my son before the Lord. And all that Abraham did on this occasion by the altar, he would exclaim and say, This is in the room of my son, and may it this day be considered before the Lord in the place of my son. And Abraham finished the whole of the service by the altar, and the service was accepted before the Lord, and he was accounted as if it had been Isaac. And the Lord blessed Abraham and his seed on that day. And Satan went to Sarah, and he appeared to her in the figure of an old man, very humble and meek. And Abraham was yet engaged in the burnt offering before the Lord. And he said unto her, Dost thou not know all the work that Abraham has made with thine only son this day? For he took Isaac and built an altar and killed him, and brought him up as a sacrifice upon the altar. And Isaac cried and wept before his father, but he looked not at him, neither did he have compassion over him. And Satan repeated these words, And he went away from her. And Sarah heard all the words of Satan, and she imagined him to be an old man from amongst the sons of men who had been with her son and had come and told her these things. And Sarah lifted up her voice and wept and cried out bitterly on account of her son. And she threw herself upon the ground, and she cast dust upon her head, and she said, "O my son Isaac, my son, oh that I had this day died instead of thee." And she continued to weep and said, "It grieves me for thee, O my son Isaac, oh that I had died this day in thy stead." And she still continued to weep and said, "It grieves me for thee after that I have reared thee and have brought thee up. Now my joy is turned into mourning over thee. I that had a longing for thee and cried and prayed to God till I bare thee at 90 years old, and now hast thou served this day for the knife and the fire to be made an offering. But I console myself with thee, my son, in its being the word of the Lord, for thou didst perform the command of thy God. For who can...
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we're in the final half-hour segment of the broadcast. I got a few more verses to read, and that'll wrap up our Joshua account, and then I'll turn it over to Zen to see what he has for us. So let me just continue here. But I console myself with thee, my son, in its being the word of the Lord, for thou didst perform the command of thy God. For who can transgress the word of our God, in whose hands is the soul of every living creature? Thou art just, O Lord our God, for all thy works are good and righteous. For I also am rejoiced with thy word, which thou didst command, and whilst mine eye weepeth bitterly, my heart rejoiceth. And Sarah laid her head upon the bosom of one of her handmaids, and she became as still as stone. And she afterward rose up and went about making inquiries till she came to Hebron, and she inquired of all those who she met walking in the road, and no one could tell her what had happened to her son. And she came with her maidservants and men servants to Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron. And she asked concerning her son. And she remained there while she sent some of her servants to seek where Abraham had gone with Isaac. They went to seek him in the house of Shem and Eber, and they could not find him. And they sought throughout the land, and he was not there. And behold, Satan came to Sarah in the shape of an old man. And he came and stood before her, and he said unto her, I spoke falsely unto thee, for Abraham did not kill his son, and he is not dead. And when she heard the word, her joy was so exceedingly violent on account of her son, that her soul went out through joy, and she died and was gathered to her people. When Abraham had finished his service, he returned with his son Isaac to his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and they came home. And Abraham sought for Sarah and could not find her, and he made inquiries concerning her. And they said unto him, She went as far as Hebron to seek you both where you had gone, for thus she was informed. And Abraham and Isaac went to her to Hebron. When they found that she was dead, they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly over her. And Isaac fell upon his mother's face and wept over her. And he said, O my mother, how hast thou left me? And where hast thou gone? Oh, how hast thou left me? And Abraham and Isaac wept greatly, and all their servants wept with them on account of Sarah, and they mourned over her a great and heavy mourning. That's a rough deal.
Yeah, it's really awesome, though, that this story fills in so much, especially of how Isaac knew that he was to be bound up and that he was a willing participant in the sacrifice, and the story of even overhearing Ishmael boasting and how they contended with one another, and that's what led to the sacrifice. And then in the larger picture, the whole story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his only, well, not his only son, but truly his son of inheritance, and his only begotten with regard to the seed of promise. And that's exactly what the Most High did for all of us. And so it's a representation of, redemption and salvation through Christ, Yahushua.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued by that. I mean, in Genesis, certainly, we don't get much of Isaac. We just know about this story, but as we just, I've been reading for over a half an hour of the
right.
elaborated version of that story.
Yeah.
What do we get? A few sentences in Genesis,
Right.
But I mean, that's an extraordinary faith on both of their parts. Well, on the one hand, Isaac was boasting to Ishmael, you just cut off a little bit of skin. If
right.
I'd be willing to sacrifice myself.
Exactly. Yes.
Careful what you say, because you
right.
never know who's listening. God's like, hey, that might be a good idea. Satan, what do you think?
We'll see. We'll see.
If you do that, he won't. He'll leave you. But I mean, both the father and the son were willing to go through with this. So I mean, it's an earthly picture of the heavenly picture.
Heavenly picture, exactly.
Of the other lamb that was prepared from the foundation of the world.
Exactly. Right.
And
exactly.
And that both were willing to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Father and son.
Right. Yes. Yeah, it's amazing because heavenly representation. Behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. I'll bring up one other point, that in the Targum, it's interesting that it points out that the altar that Yitzhak was to be sacrificed on was the same altar that Adam had built and Noah had repaired during the flood.
Wow.
Yeah, very same altar. And so I thought that was very intriguing as well.
Yeah, there was when I was a missionary in India, we were in northeast India, and out in the jungles. I mean, these were houses on, these are grass huts on stilts kind of places, And my interpreter was a guy named James, who was like he was like Chris Tomlin, man. I mean, he was an amazing praise and worship singer,
Mm-hmm.
And when we were praying, both of us, we didn't know, neither one of us knew each other, but I knew that there were a lot of healings taking place in India. And I was really trying to understand the gift of healing and trying to walk in it and all that big time for several years back then. And so I was praying, I'm like, Father, I know there's a lot of miracles that happen in India all the time. Please, will you pair me up with an interpreter who understands that so I can learn from him? And meanwhile, James is praying, Father, we don't have, access to Bible schools and education and tools and stuff like that. Will you please pair me up with somebody who really knows the Bible? And then when we got there, we met our interpreters as a big group of people, and then we end up piling onto the bus, and I just so happened to end up sitting next to James, and very quickly we both realized that our prayers had been answered, and we were just so excited that we weren't assigned, we just randomly ended up together, and he had shared the journey that he was on, and he was on a parallel journey in a different way that Father brought me there for him and brought me to him for me.
That's how he does it.
It was unbelievable trip. And one day we were walking and he was telling me about techniques for witnessing to the Hindus, because they have so many gods. I mean, they're just gods everywhere, and so the danger is they'll just add Jesus to the pile.
Right.
1,332 now, okay, well, he sounds cool. So the challenge is, convincing that no, he's the only one,
Yes,
and so
exactly.
he would just start singing in the street. He'd just kind of stand there and start singing, and he had a beautiful voice, and he would assemble a huge crowd. Like, people would just come out of the village, like, who's this singing, and what's he singing about, and they'd come and gather around. And once he got a sufficient sized crowd, he would finish his song and go, okay, you're up.
Nice.
And it was kind of cool, because just shortly before that trip, I had gone to Greece, and I had actually stood on Mars Hill, and I'd got to walk in the marketplace where Paul had seen the statues to the various gods, and they had the one for the unknown God. And he says, hey, I perceive you guys are a spiritual people. Can I tell you about that one there, the unknown God? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I had the privilege of having actually stood there and experienced all that myself not too long before I went on that trip. And so, I was kind of caught off guard, because he didn't tell me he was going to do that. He's just like, I'm thinking I'm going to videotape, I'm the camera guy, right? But he's like, no, they're ready. You preach to them. I'm like, oh boy. Okay. And I had just seen, Hindu god statues and shrines and stuff everywhere. So I just did this Mars Hill message, basically.
Yeah.
And
awesome. That's perfect.
It was incredible. Like, half the crowd, prayed to receive Christ. And
nice.
So we're heading to the next village, and he's telling me about what they called a bridge to walking Hindus over to the gospel. Was there are certain scriptures in the Hindu text that talk about the sin destroying light, and he would tell me what the Hindu scriptures said, and he's like, this is a good way to bridge, to hook them, so to speak, help them to understand. And so he was teaching me these things, and he's talking about they understand animal sacrifice and lambs and stuff like that. And so I'm like, dude, he's telling me all this as we're just walking along the road. And I said, dude, I got a videotape you telling me this. Can you tell me this again? So there was a bridge that was leading to the next village, and I stopped him just short of in front of the bridge. so that I framed the shot so that James was on the right and the bridge was to his right, but to the left of the camera. And I was like, just tell me that all over again. Everything you just told me, tell me again for the sake of the camera. So he's telling me the story about the sin destroying light and about lambs and sacrifice and stuff. And I kid you not, this pure white lamb walked up out of the jungle, came and stood in the road, looked at us, and I'm watching James, but then I see through the lens, I see this lamb, right? And I'm like geeking out, like, whoa, but I didn't want to interrupt James because he was on a roll, And as he's thinking about that, you can use this as a bridge. Kid, this is honest before God. This is the truth. That lamb turned around and walked across the bridge to the next village.
Wow!
And
wow!
I had to hold it together until he finished talking, and then after, like, dude, look.
That's amazing. Wow! Praise God.
And this, while I was reading the part about the ram that was going to walk right up to Abraham, but Satan stopped and tied him up, in the thicket there.
Right, in the thicket. Yeah.
As I was reading that, Father was bringing that story to my head. Just the memory.
That is so cool. I'm glad you shared that. That's perfect. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
A beautiful story.
Yeah, thank you. So we got about 15 minutes left. Do you have any other texts that might elaborate on some of this?
Yeah, I'll do the Legends of the Jews. I think it'll probably be shorter. Okay. We can fit it in. The birth of Isaac. When the prayer of Abraham for Abimelech was heard and the king of the Philistines recovered, the angels raised a loud cry and spoke to God thus, O Lord of the world, all these years hath Sarah been barren, as the wife of Abimelech was. Now Abraham prayed to thee, and the wife of Abimelech hath been granted a child. It is just and fair that Sarah should be remembered and granted a child. These words of the angels spoke on the New Year's Day, when the fortunes of men are determined in heaven for the whole year, bore a result. Barely 7 months later, on the first day of the Passover, Isaac was born. The birth of Isaac was a happy event, and not in the house of Abraham alone. The whole world rejoiced, for God remembered all barren women at the same time with Sarah. They all bore children, and all the blind were made to see. All the lame were made whole, the dumb were made to speak, and the mad were restored to reason. And a still greater miracle happened on the day of Isaac's birth. The sun shone with such splendor as had not been seen since the fall of man, and as he will shine again only in the future world. To silence those who ask significantly, can one 100 years old beget a son? God commanded the angel who has charge over the embryos to give them form and shape, that he fashioned Isaac precisely according to the model of Abraham, so that all-seeing Isaac might exclaim, Abraham begot Isaac. That Abraham and Sarah were blessed with offspring only after they had attained so great an age had an important reason. It was necessary that Abraham should bear the sign of the covenant upon his body before he begot the son, who was appointed to be the father of Israel. And as Isaac was the first child born to Abraham, after he was marked with the sign, he did not fail to celebrate his circumcision with much pomp and ceremony. On the 8th day, Shem, Eber, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and his whole retinue, Phicol, the captain of his host, in it they all were present, and also Terah and his son Nahor. In a word, all the great ones round about. On this occasion, Abraham could at last put a stop to the talk of the people, who said, Look at this old couple. They picked up a foundling on the highway, and they pretend he is their own son. And to make their statement seem credible, they arrange a feast in his honor. Abraham had invited not only men to the celebration, but also the wives of the magnates with their infants, and God permitted a miracle to be done. Sarah had enough milk in her breast to suckle all the babes there, and they who drew from her breast had much to thank her for. Those whose mothers had harbored only pious thoughts in their minds when they let them drink the milk that flowed from the breast of the pious Sarah. They became proselytes when they grew up, and those whose mothers let Sarah nurse them only in order to test her. They grew up to be powerful rulers, losing their dominion only at the revelation on Mount Sinai, because they would not accept the Torah. All proselytes and pious heathen are the descendants of these infants. Among the guests of Abraham were the 31 kings and 31 viceroys of Palestine who were vanquished by Joshua at the conquest of the Holy Land.
Wow.
Even Og, king of Bashan, was present, and he had to suffer the teasing of the other guests, who rallied him upon having called Abraham a sterile mule, who would never have offspring. Og, on his part, pointed at the little boy with contempt and said, "Were I to lay my finger upon him, he would be crushed." Whereupon God said to him, "Thou makest mock of the gift given to Abraham? As thou livest, thou shalt look upon millions and myriads of his descendants, and in the end thou shalt fall into their hands." When Isaac grew up, quarrels broke out between him and Ishmael on account of the rights of the firstborn. Ishmael insisted he should receive a double portion of the inheritance after the death of Abraham, and Isaac should receive only one portion. Ishmael, who had been accustomed from his youth to use the bow and arrow, was in the habit of aiming his missiles in the direction of Isaac, saying at the same time that he was but jesting. Sarah, however, insisted that Abraham make over to Isaac all he owned, that no disputes might arise after his death. For she said, "Ishmael is not worthy of being heir with my son, nor with a man like Isaac, and certainly not with my son Isaac." Furthermore, Sarah insisted that Abraham divorce himself from Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, and send away the woman and her son, so that there be not in common between them and her own son, and either in this world or in the future world. Of all the trials Abraham had to undergo, none was so hard to bear as this, for it grieved him sorely to separate himself from his son. God appeared to him in the following night and said to him, "Abraham, knowest thou not that Sarah was appointed to be thy wife from her mother's womb? She is thy companion and the wife of thy youth, and I name not Hagar as thy wife, nor Sarah as thy bondwoman. What Sarah spoke unto thee was not but truth. And let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman." The next morning Abraham rose up early, gave Hagar her bill of divorcement, and sent her away with her son, first binding a rope about her loins, that all might see she was a bondwoman. The evil glance cast upon her stepson by Sarah made him sick and feverish, so that Hagar had to carry him grown up as he was. In his fever he drank often of the water in the bottle given her by Abraham, as she left his house, and the water was quickly spent. That she might not look upon the death of her child, Hagar cast Ishmael under the willow shrubs growing on the selfsame spot, whereupon the angels had once spoken with her, and made known to her that she would bear a son. In the bitterness of her heart, she spoke to God and said, "Yesterday thou didst say to me, I will greatly multiply thy seed, that it shall not be numbered for multitude, and today my son dies of thirst." Ishmael himself cried unto God, and his prayer and the merits of Abraham brought them help in their need. Though the angels appeared against Ishmael before God, they said, "Wilt thou cause a well of water to spring up for him whose descendants will let thy children of Israel perish with thirst?" But God replied and said, "What is Ishmael at this moment, righteous or wicked?" And when the angels called him righteous, God continued, "I treat man according to his deserts at each moment." At that moment Ishmael was pious indeed, for he was praying to God in the following words: "O Lord of the world, if it be thy will that I shall perish, then let me die in some other way, not by thirst, for the tortures of thirst are great beyond all others." Hagar, instead of praying to God, addressed her supplications to the idols of her youth. The prayer of Ishmael was accepted before God, and he bade Miriam's well spring up. The well created in the twilight of the sixth day of creation. Even after this miracle, Hagar's face was no stronger than before. She filled the bottle with water because she feared it might again be spent and no other would be nigh. Thereupon she journeyed to Egypt with her son, for throw the stick into the air as thou wilt, it will always land on its point. Hagar had come from Egypt, and to Egypt she returned to choose a wife for her son. The wife of Ishmael bore 4 sons and a daughter. And after Ishmael, his mother, and his wife had children, went and returned to the wilderness. They made themselves tents in the wilderness in which they dwelt, and they continued to encamp and journey month by month and year by year. And God gave Ishmael flocks and herds and tents on account of Abraham his father, and the man increased in cattle. And some time after, Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, I will go and see my son Ishmael. I yearn to look upon him, for I have not seen him for a long time. And Abraham rode upon one of his camels to the wilderness to seek his son Ishmael, for he heard that he was dwelling in a tent in the wilderness, with all belonging to him. And Abraham went to the wilderness, and he reached the tent of Ishmael about noon, and he asked after him. He found the wife of Ishmael sitting in the tent with her children, and her husband and his mother were not with them. And Abraham asked the wife of Ishmael, saying, Where has Ishmael gone? And she said, He has gone to the field to hunt game. And Abraham was still mounted upon the camel, and he would not alight upon the ground, as he had sworn to his wife Sarah that he would not get off from the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, My daughter, give me a little water that I may drink, for I am fatigued and tired from the journey. And Ishmael's wife answered and said to Abraham, We have neither water nor bread. And she was sitting in the tent and did not take any notice of Abraham. She did not even ask him who he was, but all the while she was beating her children in the tent. And she was cursing them, and she also cursed her husband Ishmael, and spoke evil of him. And Abraham heard the words of Ishmael's wife to her children, and it was an evil to his eyes. And Abraham called the woman to come out to him from the tent. And the woman came out and stood face to face with Abraham, while Abraham was still mounted upon the camel. And Abraham said to Ishmael's wife, When thy husband Ishmael returns home, say these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither to seek thee, and his appearance was thus and so, and thus was his figure. I did not ask him who he was, and seeing thou wast not here, he spoke unto me, and said, When Ishmael thy husband returns, tell him, Thus did the man say, When thou comest home, put away this tent pin which thou hast placed here, and place another tent pin in its stead. And Abraham finished his instructions to the woman. He turned and went off on the camel homeward. And when Ishmael returned to the tent, he heard the words of his wife, and he knew that it was his father, and his wife had not honored him. And Ishmael understood his father's words, that he had spoken to his wife, and he hearkened to the voice of his father. He divorced his wife, and she went away. And Ishmael afterward went to the land of Canaan. And he took another wife, and he brought her to his tent to place her where he dwelt. At the end of 3 years, Abraham said, I will go again and see Ishmael my son, for I have not seen him for a long time. He rode upon his camel and went to the wilderness. He reached the tent of Ishmael about noon. And he asked after Ishmael, and his wife came out of the tent, and she said, He is not here, my lord, for he is gone to hunt in the fields and feed the camels. And the woman said to Abraham, Turn in, my lord, into the tent, and eat a morsel of bread, for thy soul must be wearied on account of the journey. And Abraham said to her, I will not stop, for I am in haste to continue my journey, but give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And the woman hastened and ran into the tent. She brought out water and bread to Abraham, which she placed before him, urging him to eat and drink. And he ate and drank, and his heart was merry. And he blessed his son Ishmael, and he finished his meal. And he blessed the Lord, and he said to Ishmael's wife, When Ishmael comes home, say these words to him. A very old man from the land of the Philistines came hither, and asked after thee, and thou wast not here. And I brought him out bread and water, and he ate and drank, and his heart was merry. And he spoke these words to me, When Ishmael thy husband comes home, say unto him, Thy tent pin which thou hast is very good. Do not put it away from the tent. And Abraham finished commanding the woman. He rode off to his house in the land of the Philistines. And when Ishmael came to his tent, his wife went forth to meet him with joy and cheerful heart, and she told him the words of the old man. Ishmael knew that it was his father, and that his wife had honored him. And he praised the Lord, and Ishmael then took his wife, and his children, and his cattle, and all belonging to him. And he journeyed from there, and he went to his father in the land of the Philistines. And Abraham related to Ishmael all that had happened between him and his first wife, and Ishmael had taken according to what she had done. And Ishmael and his children dwelt.
That's it.
Well, we are at the end.
We'll pick up on that when your show next.
Next week. All right. Be blessed all. Good night.
Bless everybody.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.